All right, so this is going to be a walkthrough to get your characters set up for animation using the Animator component. And the first step is actually creating the animations. And for this assignment, you can create your own from scratch using Blender or whatever you like. And if you're doing something that's not a humanoid, that's what I recommend. But if your character is going to be a biped, you can use this tool called Mixamo that is available through your Adobe account. And it lets you automatically rig a character and then use some pre-made motion capture to animate it. So I'm going to pause my recording while I log in here so you don't see my password. Okay, so this is what Mixamo looks like. On the left here, I have a bunch of animations I can browse, and on the right is kind of a preview. And this is the default Mixamo character, but you're going to want to actually upload your own. So when you're modeling your humanoid figure, go ahead and model it in a kind of a T pose like this. This is what Mixamo is expecting. And if you didn't model it this way, you could use the armature to in Blender to pose it like this and then apply that transformation. It's a modifier, just like the subdivision surface and things like that. Anyway, so I'm going to upload a character here. So it takes FBX, OBJs, and zips, but I think it's expecting one of these two things inside the zip folder. So I'll select my character. I have a ton of stuff here. I think I've saved something on the desktop here. Let's see. Here we go. So this is a character I made for my project. He's Andrew Carnegie, basically. So to start with, you orient the character so it's facing the camera like this. Next. And then you place these markers on the body where it says, and this character isn't perfectly symmetrical because, because I made it physically and then scanned it in. So I can turn off symmetry here and adjust these markers so that they're actually where they're supposed to be, kind of. And then I can change this, since this character doesn't have any fingers, he just kind of has these paddle hands. I'll change this to be no fingers. And then next, and it'll process for a minute, and I'll pause it until it's finished. All right, and when it's finished, you should see the character looking around like this. And it's okay that it doesn't have the textures. We can add the textures back in Unity. All we're interested in for now is the mesh. It'll keep our UV maps and everything. So I'll hit next. And here's his default pose. I can pick from any of these, really. I'll try samba dancing. Pretty good. And Mixamo offers these kind of sliders, so I can make him dance with more energy or a different stance. And if you see that the arms are clipping through the body, you can change this character arm space slider. And once you have the animation parameters set the way you want, you can just hit download. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I want to switch this to FBX for Unity. It just changes the way it's formatted a little bit. And with skin is fine. We can add keyframe reduction. So motion capture data by default will have a keyframe every frame. So it's very dense. And if you want and you actually don't need to use keyframe reduction in most cases, but if you ever would want to go back in Blender and change the animation, you'll want to use keyframe reduction. So it'll sort of try to figure out how to tween the motions so there's not a keyframe on every frame. But besides that, I'm going to leave this be, and I'll hit download and save it to a folder on my computer. So once So I've just downloaded that one motion, and you can just keep going and add more. So maybe I'll do this jump. Maybe have him do some boxing. And I can change this so he's maybe punching up a little higher. Well, it's Andrew Carnegie, so he always has to punch down. And you can change certain, that's maybe too much. It's punch distance. Okay. Anyway, good enough. I'll hit download. That all looks good, and I'll download it. And I'm just going to download it into the same folder. So I'm making this kind of collection of animations. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to import these into a Unity project. So I'm going to pause and open a new Unity project to try this out in. Okay, so here's our new Unity project, and I'm going to go ahead and import all my files. So I also have moved this texture in. So I have the original FBX, the texture, and then these FBX files which contain the different animations. So I can just go ahead and drag all of these into the project folder, and it'll take a second to import. Here they are. I'll just organize these really quickly. Let's see, I'll call this animations. So these are all my animations I downloaded from Mixamo. And here's my texture, and here's my original guy. To start with, I want to actually just bring in one of these, look at the import settings for each of these files, and just make sure that they're going to all be the same. So here's, I can look at the rig to start with. Let's see here. I think I can just switch this to humanoid and hit apply, and it should just kind of figure it out. Looks like it did. And then if I go to animation and I hit play, we can see that's moving the way we expect it to. And I can hit make it loop, loop time, loop pose. So with these settings checked, loop time causes the animation to loop. And then loop pose will actually kind of smoothly interpolate so that even if the start and end of the loop aren't exactly the same, it'll kind of smooth between them so it appears as though it's a perfect loop. And then these other settings here are important, and they have to do with the root motion. So sometimes we want to make it so that our game object is actually moved by the animation itself. And other times we would want to say, have our character running in place and then move the game object manually. It looks like my loop pose is kind of screwing up this foot somehow. Something weird is happening there, so I might just turn that off and see. It's a little better. It still is kind of messed up, but I will just leave it for the purposes of this demo. So this one looks good, and I'll hit apply. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to all of these. So I'll set this to humanoid. And then for the animation, I'll just make it loop and hit apply. And then I'll do this for this last one as well. And this rig step is very important. We need this to be exactly the same for all of the motions for the same character. This animation type is kind of setting up the armature to be animated. And the humanoid one will do it the same way every time by default, so that we can use animations from these different files on the same object. Okay, so now I'm just going to click and drag one of these into the scene, and I'll just start with the Samba one. There it is. Oops. Let's see here. So I can go ahead and add that texture to this character. I think I'm in 2019, but what I'm showing you shouldn't really be different in 2018. So I'm going to click and drag this over here, and it'll kind of create a shader for us, or a material, excuse me. And it's maybe a little shinier than I want, so I can change the smoothness. Maybe make it a little darker. And then I can just rotate him so that he's facing the camera more, just so you get a good view. And there he is. If we hit play, we won't see him moving at all because we haven't actually added the animation yet to this object. So the way that we're going to control animation is with this thing called the Animator. And you all will have seen this before, but I realized I hadn't made a video for it, so here we are. So you can have it generate an Animator controller component just by taking this motion clip and dropping it on there, this thing called Mixamo.com. You can rename these two if you like. So this one is Samba. I'll hit apply. We should see it change the name there. Yep. And this one's boxing, which is right, and that one's yelling. Okay, so it's just this one got messed up somehow. So now I dragged that Samba onto this game object, and it created this asset. So this is actually an asset that represents the animations attached to this character. And I can see all of the animations together in this Animator window. So what the Animator component and this Animator controller actually does is it creates a kind of flow chart of all the different behaviors that this character can have. So by default, we will go from entry to this one. It's called Mixamo.com because that was the name of the file when I added it on, but we'll change it to Samba. So we start here and we go follow this arrow to Samba. And if I hit play, and I'll move this over so we can watch the animator while our character is playing. Let's see here. We should see some stuff happen here. So we see this progress meter fill up as it's playing through the Samba animation. Now he's left the screen, but that's okay. And then it'll loop. If I look at him here, we can see that it started over again. So if I want to start adding more behaviors to this animator, I can, because these all have the same settings for their armature, for their rig, I can just drag this in, this boxing, and and so now I have another, let me get rid of what I just did here. Never mind that. So now I have another animation state here that I can transition to. So in order to create a transition, I just right-click on the state that I want to start from, click Make Transition, and then drag this arrow to the state I want to go to. And so now, by default, this transition just happens at a certain time. We'll transition over to boxing. So we'll play, this will start here, play through the whole Samba animation, and then transition to boxing. So we'll see that here. And I'll go to the scene view so we can actually see where he goes. So we're halfway through, and then you should see it jump up here like that. And now he's boxing. And now he's kind of stuck in this boxing loop. So he'll never go back to dancing. He'll never dance again. So I can make a transition back to Samba if I want. So that's right click, make transition, and then click, and then drag the arrow down to the state I want to go to. So now we watch, I'll go to the scene view. He dances, he punches, and then he dances again. And in these transitions, I can change how long that transition takes. If it looks a little awkward, I can change when it starts, and so on. And that'll be it for this video. I'll add one more that's about how to control these transitions from code. So I'll be back soon.